Um, the major new product launch which we have is a range of brake pads called D-Tech, which is a new formulation designed to reduce the amount of dust created by the brake pad, and it has 45% less dust than a standard brake pad. The important thing about this is in the past we've seen that low dust formulations have tended not to have such good braking performance, and the new D-Tech product has exactly the same braking performance and 45% less dust. So it's an important product launch for us from that point of view. And I think it's also interesting because we are introducing technology which we use in the North American aftermarket for Europe. So it's an illustration of how a global company can use product information, skills, knowledge from one area of the world to bring a new product idea into another area of the world. And that's what we are doing. We already sell the D-Tech products in North America and in Asia Pacific, so we're bringing it into Europe, and we think that there will be a positive response from the market. So this is the official launch of that. As you know, we are a global leader in effectively safety products, so brakes, steering, suspension, and occupant safety systems, seat belts, and so on. Increasingly, all of those products are coming together through electronics. And I think one of the interesting things is, for example, if you think about a handbrake, 20 years ago it was a lever and a piece of wire and a brake. Today we are selling an electronic version of the handbrake where it's activated by electronics, and it means that the brake can also be part of the ESP system on the car or the ABS system on the car. So suddenly what was a pretty basic mechanical product becomes integrated into the electronics of the car. And I think that over the next years, I don't know how many years, but let's say over the next years, we will see increasingly many more things like that in the car where electronics come to play a very, very important role. I think it's interesting. I have been working for TRW only 3 months, but I worked for Lucas as it was in the 1990s. And many of the things which we now see as original equipment fitment on cars, like adaptive cruise control, for example, or lane assist warning, are things that were being developed by the company in the late 90s. So there's quite a long period when these products are developed and then introduced, and then they become, if you like, mainstream products. ABS is another good example. To begin with, it was only for expensive cars. Now it's for every car. So I think we will continue to see this increasing electronic content in cars over the next few years, affecting all kinds of systems. And we as TRW are well placed in electronics and in integration of systems within the vehicles. And we clearly see that this is going to have an impact on the aftermarket. We as TRW have been involved in the preparation of the European legislation for eCall, lobbying to make sure that the independent aftermarket interest is protected within eCall, because it's clear that it could be a system which would act to guide the motorist only to the franchise dealer network rather than giving him a free choice of where he wants to get his car repaired. So we've campaigned hard for the system to be open in that sense and not limited only to the vehicle manufacturer networks. What I think is going to happen, and it comes back a little bit to what we were saying before, is that we see this explosion of electronics. So eCall is another example, because you are linking GPS systems, you're linking that to an automatic call to the emergency services, sending information about the number of airbags that have been deployed in the vehicle and all this kind of thing. And I'm sure other things will come towards it as well. And what that's doing, along with other electronic systems in the vehicle, is making vehicles more complex to repair, more complex to identify the correct part to fit on the vehicle. So it's important that we find ways to help our customers and their customers, so the workshops, to be able to be successful in repairing cars which are so much more complex. And we have a number of initiatives that we are doing now as part of an overall, what we call a digital strategy, to try and strengthen the position of the independent garages, because we want them to be the best they can possibly be, and that means supporting them. It means supporting them with training, as we have traditionally done. But the internet offers us the opportunity with something called Tech Corner, which we've just launched. I don't know if you've seen it in the press pack, to communicate directly to the workshops important information about how the products work in service, how they can fit them, what they can do with them. And the good thing about that is if we do a training course, maybe we do that once every 12 months or once every 24 months, but the world is changing so fast, we need a way to feed that information to the workshops on a regular basis. And the internet really gives us a huge opportunity to communicate much, much more intensively with the workshops, to make sure that they're able to cope with what's changing in the aftermarket. There is always a danger that that will happen, but we know very well that the legislative background within Europe protects the interests of the independent aftermarket and the independent workshop. And I think that we, as suppliers to the independent aftermarket, want to make sure that that remains the case. I have worked in my career not only for component manufacturers but also for vehicle manufacturers. And it's important for them as well to see that the independent aftermarket is healthy, because their own networks do not have enough capacity to service and repair every car on the road. So it's important for them that customers who buy their cars are able to get them repaired in the independent aftermarket, in my opinion. And you see many people, many vehicle manufacturers trying to sell parts to the independent aftermarket. So obviously they recognize that that is another way in which their products will be serviced and maintained. I'm sure that the sale of parts online is growing. I'm sure it's growing. We only have to look in France, for example, at Oscaro and the growth of that business. And there are other players. And there are many of our traditional distributors as well who are beginning to sell parts online. But it's still a relatively small proportion of the total market. Even in tyres, it's less than 10%, and I'm sure that for parts it's probably much less than 10%. But it is growing. I think the real impact is much more that we will have a consumer who is much better informed than they have ever been in the past. The effect is to bring transparency to the market, so that means that the motorist will know much more, because you can go online, you can look at repair plans, you can look at all kinds of things that you never had access to before. So the important thing for workshops, in my opinion, is to recognise that they will be dealing with a customer who is much better informed on all aspects. And I think it's very interesting. We did some research in China, which is a very interesting market, because you have very young cars. Most people only have, this is the first car they've ever owned, so they don't have any experience about how to get it repaired, what to do if they need to get something changed. And the research that we did showed that 80% of people who buy or have brake pads changed on their cars in China research on the internet before they have the job done, to try to find a garage to do it, to find out about the products, to inform themselves before they go to the workshop. And that's very interesting, because of course we have a traditional market, mature market in Europe, where everybody knows, yes, I can go to the independent garage. But I think we will see that the consumer will really be much better informed. And that, on one side, that means pressure on prices, potentially. But on the other side, it simply means that the garage will not be able to treat the customer as though they know nothing, because they will, for sure, be much better informed than was the case in the past. I believe so, and I believe it's a big opportunity for workshops as well, because professional workshops doing a good job have nothing to be afraid of. And they should be able to develop a much closer relationship with their customer by demonstrating to the customer what they are doing and that they know what they're doing. So I see that as a positive opportunity for workshops. But interestingly, we see in some markets that the workshops are saying, okay, if you bring the parts to me, then my labour rate is higher than it is if I sell you the parts, which I think is a good commercial response to what's happening. But better to do that than say, I don't want you as a customer, but I find a way to satisfy you as a customer and also to protect my own business. Yes, our business with remanufactured components is growing across Europe, and particularly on remanufactured calipers, but also steering gear and so on. And we think that will continue because from the green point of view, ecologically, we are recycling effectively, so we are reducing waste, prolonging the life of products which can be used again, and not selling a product which is lower quality than the new product. The quality is equivalent, but part of it is recycled, and I think that's a positive thing. And as I say, I think we will continue to see that grow. Yes, of course, the workshops demand rapid delivery of parts, because they need to satisfy their customer, and we all know that if you take your car to the garage in the morning, you want it back in the evening, unless it's a very serious crash repair or something like that. I think that what will be interesting, or what potentially will be interesting in the aftermarket, will be again the effect of the internet, because in the past we had no real way of knowing what the real demand was. And with the explosion of information that we are going to have, then I think we will find ways to understand better what the demand is. And if we understand better what the demand is, then from the distributor point of view, they can tailor their stock to the real demand that they are facing. Very interestingly, I was talking to one of your colleagues from an Italian magazine this morning, and they have set up a website for garages where they are recording all transactions and collecting information. And then they are able to say to the distributor, look, the vehicle park in your city is like this, because it's not the same necessarily as the vehicle park in another city. So it gives them a chance to really predict better the parts that they will sell, because they understand better what their real market is. And clearly, I think then that gives the opportunity to reduce the amount of slow-moving stock, focus more on fast-moving stock, which is a way to reduce cost. I think also, traditionally, perhaps many businesses have felt that stock is an asset, so they like to keep a big stock, but it's money. And so if we can find ways to reduce stock without losing the speed of delivery, then that's a way to improve the overall economic position of the aftermarket. I think this is a very interesting area. We are working on something called the ID Workshop. I don't know whether you have heard about that, which is a system that allows us to integrate the workflow for the workshops. So it's a portal allowing us to integrate business management software, if you want to call it that. So when the customer arrives at the workshop, the car is booked in. Then it integrates that with diagnostics. It integrates that with parts identification and ordering. And it integrates again with creating the invoice once the job is finished. So it gives the garage the opportunity to have that whole process through one portal, instead of having to work in a lot of different systems. And part of that is the internet-based diagnostics. So instead of having a big diagnostic machine like that cupboard in the corner, you will have only your tablet, and the diagnostics will be done from the cloud, which has two benefits. The first one is it's always up to date, and the second one is, because it's in the cloud, it's learning all the time. So if there are 1,000 garages connected and a problem is identified in one garage today, all the other 999 will have access to that information immediately, because it will go back to the central cloud. And it means, if you think about it, Traditionally in a workshop, you have one big diagnostic machine there, so you can only diagnose one car at a time. If you have 10 PCs and 10 bays, you can diagnose 10 cars at one go. So for less investment, the workshop can have more capacity. And I think the important thing is for a company like TRW is to think about the ways in which we can help workshops to be more efficient, to be more effective, and to be more competitive. An ID workshop is a way of doing that. It's a way to think about the independent aftermarket, think about how we can help it develop for the future. So if I were running a workshop, I would be looking to companies like TRW to help me. And I think that's part of what we have to do. The Portuguese market is very important for us in the context of our European business. It's a market where we have long history, where we have been selling products as Lucas for many years, and now as TRW. We have some great customer relationships in Portugal, and we want to carry on that way because we like to be in Portugal, we enjoy selling there, and I hope that we are making good money for all of our customers. I believe we are. Yes. In the aftermarket, our business is growing, and I think in Europe probably we would see a market which is more or less stable. So we are happy because our business is growing.